Welcome back to my series on chess opening theory. In this video, I'm going to be taking a look at the bishop d2, knight b5 sideline in the Winawer variation of the French defense. So the French defense is when we have the moves e4, e6, d4, d5. And the Winawer is when white now plays knight to c3 and black plays bishop to b4. And the main line continues with e5, c5. And today we're going to be looking at bishop d2, in which case the move that I like to play is knight to e7. And then white has a number of ways of continuing here. We previously looked at a3 and d takes c5. So in this video, we're going to look a bit at knight b5. And this move does look a little bit scary, but it's not too bad. And black is generally doing okay if they know what they are doing. So here, our bishop is currently kind of under attack. Like, we probably don't want to really be taking back with the pawn. That's a bit funny. And also, white has some nasty ideas of knight to d6 check. So generally what black should do here is take the bishop, and then after queen takes d2, like, it's important to note that the capture was with check, so whites did not have time to do this. After queen takes d2, castle kingside to stop any, knights coming in and taking away our castling rights. And then in this position, white will generally play pawn to f4, because there are some potential annoying ideas with, taking here and then playing knight to c6. So white generally wants to solidify their center over here. And then there are a number of decent moves for black in this position. Like a6 is okay, and if I recall correctly, c takes d4 is also okay. But I just like bishop to d7. Bishop to d7 is perfectly fine. And here, the two main moves that white will play are either d takes c5 or knight to d6. D takes c5 is actually more commonly played, but it's not too difficult. Like, it's not that scary in my opinion. We just trade over here, we get rid of our bad bishop. And then we play a5. Basically, we're going to regain this pawn at some point. And we want to stop white from playing pawn to b4, which would support this pawn. If white tries playing pawn to c3 to support the pawn that way, then we just play pawn to a4, getting ready to take en passant. And white has to, of course, be mindful of the rooks staring at each other if the a-pawns vanish from the board. So overall, I don't really consider this position to be that challenging for black to play. Black has kind of gotten rid of their problem piece. Black has decent presence in the center, and black should mainly just focus on regaining the pawn over here. I think black can equalize just fine. Like, if we turn on the engine, it already just says this is very equal. So instead, today we're going to look at a line that looks a little bit more critical, or looks a little bit scarier, but in actuality is not. So we'll look at knight to d6, and then here we can just take on d4. Since the pawn on c5 was kind of under attack, might as well just deal with that threat by taking a pawn. And white will very often just play knight to f3 here, because if white takes with their queen, then black can develop with tempo, and that's a little bit annoying. And one thing that white has to keep in mind is that if they capture on b7, then queen to b6 can actually be quite strong, quite annoying, because black will regain this b-pawn over here, and it's actually white's pawn structure that would be in a worse shape after that, since black would have this strong pawn, whereas white would be left with an isolated c-pawn over here. So that's not too good. So after knight to f3, knight bc6 is good. And then here in this position, white actually should not take back the pawn. If white does take back the pawn like this, then black doesn't even trade. Black can instead go for some fun stuff with pawn to f6. Just apply a lot of pressure on white over here. Like, white's king is still in the middle, and black would love to just blast open the center. That would be amazing. This knight is actually kind of a silly piece, because if it's not going to take this guy, what is the knight even doing here? It's very active, but it has no backup, so it can't really actually attack anything or accomplish anything, even though it's on this very strong square. And if black can get rid of this pawn, if this pawn vanished from the board, then this knight is actually very, very precarious over here. Like, it does not have a whole lot of squares it can go to, and it's just waiting to be attacked. Like, it would only really have this and maybe that, but, you know, that's not looking so good. Like, I should show the engine evaluation here. It actually prefers black by a fair amount here. So, oh, and of course, knight takes b7 is terrible because of this kind of stuff, in addition to this. So that's no good. The engine really hates this for white. Just very bad. And so white will generally either play bishop to d3 here or castle queenside. Castle queenside is kind of interesting, but there aren't that many games that feature it. b4 is also kind of a funky idea. But bishop to d3 is the most common move here, just getting ready to castle. Like, white doesn't really need to rush taking back this pawn. The pawn is very hard to actually defend. And so here, black will generally go f6. And now, in this position, the move that has always been played is for white to castle kingside, and that is what happened in the game today. But I thought I would briefly mention just a very cool exchange sacrifice that is possible if white castles queenside, which is also a reasonable move. Like, it's a reasonable choice for white to go with. Like, there's actually a cool little idea that black can play for in this position. Like, black can go for f takes e5, and white probably should not take back with the knight, because that would leave this knight a little stranded over here. So, but if white takes back with the pawn, there's a very neat idea with rook takes f3, pawn takes f3, knight takes e5, and objectively this position is about equal, but it's still a very cool, very fascinating idea. Like, opening up this file looks very scary, but at the same time, going after this knight is fun. Like, there's a lot of chaos here. This is a very interesting position, but it hasn't actually been played, by titled players. White would probably actually be very scared to allow this. Like, white would generally not go into this position unless they know what they are doing, like, unless they have studied it. But anyway, this is not what happened in the game. Instead, after pawn to f6, putting pressure on the center over here, trying to, destroy white's central presence, which is kind of a common theme in the Winawer, especially in the sidelines. Instead, white just castled kingside. And before continuing, I thought that I should just introduce the players. So with the white pieces, we have FIDE master Peter Kokol, and he is a FIDE master from Slovenia, and I actually was able to find more information about him. So he was basically active in classical chess between 1998 and 2012, when he achieved the FIDE master title. I would guess then that since this game was played in 2013, that it's probably a rapid game, since the Czech Open does have a rapid section, but I didn't have time to actually confirm this. Yes, and basically, FIDE master Kokol has done very well in rapid, including very recently he was the national champion for Slovenia in rapid chess in 2022. And currently, he's mainly a coach on Lichess, so I will provide a link to his coach page in the description. And with the black pieces, we have Grandmaster Harika Dronavalli, who also has the WGM title, although the unrestricted GM title, as you know, is much more prestigious. And she has won, she came in third place 3 times in the Women's World Chess Championship in 2012, 2015, and 2017, and has also been awarded multiple awards by the government of India, including the Arjuna Award, which, is, if I recall correctly, for outstanding performance in sports and games. And she actually won the FIDE Women's Grand Prix event in 2016. And and at one point in time was the world number 5 in terms of rating among female players. But I think against male players, she's still quite strong. Has had a peak FIDE rating of close to 2550, like exactly 2543, which is pretty decent. Like pretty good for a Grandmaster. And let's see. And this particular game was played at the Czech Open in 2013. And more information about the players and the event can be found in the video description. And now back to the game. And let's see. So in this position, Black continued with Queen B6. Kind of doing many things at once. Like very often in chess, the best moves are moves that do a lot of things, like help you with a number of different possible plans, moves that let you be very flexible. Or like here, in this case, what this move is doing is it's putting the queen on this annoying diagonal for white to deal with, since they played f4, which opened up that diagonal. Add some defense to this pawn, also add some defense here, also put some pressure over here, also connects the rooks. Like overall, just a very handy multi-purpose move. White now played pawn to a4, grabbing some space on the queen side. Black plays pawn to a6, grabbing this particular square where the bishop and the knight might have been happy to come to at some point. White now plays pawn to a5, which grabs some further space, grabs the b6 square, but part of the problem is that white can't really actually do anything with that square. The only thing this does really accomplish is just kicking the queen away. Black probably was not actually interested in taking this pawn because white could probably bring a rook and then take the pawn over here. And so anyway, White now played queen to e1, probably with ideas of coming to one of these squares, since that's very often what you do when you're playing queen to e1. And Black now plays knight to c8, basically trying to get rid of this annoying knight over here, since this knight is kind of restricting Black a little. Well, another thing I forgot to mention about queen to e1 is that it also defends the e-pawn. I should have mentioned that, I forgot to. Anyway. White now plays queen to h4. Black plays pawn to h6. White was threatening to maybe come in like this, although by playing pawn to h6, there is a nasty little weakness that Black has to keep an eye on. Black is currently trying to just get rid of this knight, maybe even win a pawn if White allows that trade to take place over there. So White decides to take the knight because the knight didn't, White's own knight didn't really have any good squares to go to. Everything was covered. Knight was kind of stranded. So Black takes back with their a rook, because this rook, it might have some work to do if the files ever come open. Rooks belong on open files, as they say. And now, in this position, White played a move that at first, I was kind of debating whether I wanted to include this game when I saw this move, because it's quite a bad move, Although if this was a rapid game, it would kind of make some sense that white would play this. But I kind of, after thinking a bit more about this position and about what's happening here, after looking at it a bit more closely, I kind of realized that even though the engine might say that the position is about equal, in actuality, black is actually kind of strategically winning because it's very hard to actually find a plan for white. White has kind of overextended in a number of ways. White's pieces are kind of all confused and kind of tripping over each other and all kind of doing their own thing and not really aren't really all that well coordinated. Like it's like they all look a little silly. Like for example, over here, white has their pawn on a5, which does grab some space over here, but what can white actually do with this square? What is white actually doing on the queen side with this? Like, nothing really, and the problem with this pawn is that black might be able to take it at some point. Like, black isn't currently going to take it because black wants their knight to keep an eye on this pawn over here. So as a result, this rook is kind of tied down to, staring at this pawn, and it's difficult for this rook to participate in much else. Similarly, it's hard for this knight to really do much, like for this knight to move anywhere, because as soon as it does, this pawn will be captured, and then the knight, this knight will jump back and defend this guy again, or maybe the queen will come to b6 and defend, this guy that way. Okay, so, it's a very unpleasant position for white. And white probably doesn't want to, do this trade over here because black is quite happy to take back with their rook. And basically, black would have a very, very strong central presence, like kind of 3 pawns in the center, doing various things, and white would be kind of giving up their only their main pawn in the center. Like the f pawn is kind of in there too, but it just wouldn't be good. It would be giving black a fair amount of control. Like if the rook is there, then the other rook comes and apply some pressure over here. Things are not looking too good for white. So as a result, it's actually really, really hard to play white's side in this position. Like just from a practical standpoint. Like I remember the engine was kind of suggesting some really funky things for white to do, some really silly things that just involve making a bazillion queen moves. Like I remember seeing something like queen to g3 with the idea of trying to come here and maybe get in like that. And then black has a number of choices here. Black can go for f5, just lock things down, make this bishop look almost as silly as this bishop. Or black can even take over here and open things up, although this is probably actually white's best try if black does do that. So I remember f5 was best, and like I've looked at this game with an engine multiple times, and then it was something like putting the queen over here to defend this, and then a whole bunch of shuffling of the pieces around, and it's just a very weird position where objectively it might be equal, but it's kind of just white is kind of just waiting for black to decide how the game will continue, because it's kind of black who kind of holds all the cards here, and that can be, like from a psychological point of view, that's not a whole lot of fun. Like there are some positions where black ends up making a break on g5, with this knight gone and just having 2 strong pawns here. Like if you're an aggressive player, you don't like playing against that. But if you're a strong player, like a grandmaster, you kind of recognize that, some positions are like that, and you've got to just stay patient and wait for the opponent to decide how the game will continue. But anyway, with that long preamble out of the way, white played the terrible move pawn to g4, which kind of leads to a losing position very quickly. And so anyway, black continued with f takes e5, f takes e5. Like, black basically just, starts opening things up, because basically white's pawn to g4 push, it's not really justified. Like, white doesn't really have all their pieces participating on the king side and stuff, and black has plenty of defensive resources. Like, black can drop the bishop back, the queen defends this thing, and the bishop would at the very least defend, this weak square over here. So it's not really justified to go for an attack like this. This, black basically is like, okay, I'll win a pawn, and then I'll just try to, what's it called? I'll just try to trade all your pieces away, and even maybe get my queen in here, because, this diagonal and this diagonal have both been weakened very severely. So anyway, black plays knight takes e5, kind of forking white's pieces here, kind of forcing something to get traded off, also winning a pawn. And so white decided to trade their knight. White could have gone for knight takes d4, but that does just allow a lot more trades, since the rooks will go like that, maybe a whole bunch of nasty stuff, and it's actually white's king who is in a lot of danger in the endgame. I should probably just show a line like that, since it might be hard to see. So if, for example, knight takes here, then you just take this guy, and then after c takes d3, we can even just bring the queen to e5 right now, threatening all sorts of nasty stuff, also defending the g5 square from this. Like, we are kind of in a major piece endgame, and one of the most important things in major piece endgames is king safety. So you really do not want to have this stuff open in such an endgame. It's very bad. The engine just hates this position. But this is not what happened in the game. And also there's even this potentially at some point if the knight ever gets out of there. Anyway, it's not what happened in the game. Instead, after knight takes e5, white decided to trade the knights. And black took back with their queen. Black's queen is getting very active, getting very strong over here. Here, white decided to try for some interesting tactics with queen to e7. White does have some interesting ideas, although unfortunately they didn't really work out this game. Black played queen to e3 check, and in this position, white played king to h1, which was a bit of a mistake. King to g2 was a little bit more accurate, and if you want, you can try to figure out why king to g2 is a bit better. It's actually a little bit subtle why it's a bit better. It's very subtle. So if you want, you can pause the video and try to figure out why king g2 is the better move, and I will just reveal the reason in 3, 2, 1. So basically, the way that black is going to continue, like, white does have a bit of a threat to win the exchange, but black doesn't have to care about that, since white's king is actually very weak. So black continued with the move bishop to b5. So white takes the rook, black takes back, and now a cool little idea by white, which sadly doesn't really work. Bishop to h7 check. The point is that after king takes bishop, queen takes rook, winning the exchange. And now the reason why king to h1 isn't so good is because black can play pawn to d3, and basically white can't take this pawn. Like, it's a very subtle reason, but essentially what's happening is that if white takes this pawn, I should probably show that. That's like, basically the bishop is going to be coming in like this. So white has to waste time playing king to g2 now, kind of leaving the rook unattended over there, or out of the game over there, I should say, because black was essentially threatening checkmate with bishop to e4 check. Bishop to e4 check anyway, king to f1 is forced, and then some nastiness with bishop to f3, and things are not looking good here. Like, very messy stuff. Like, basically, white has to give up the exchange back, and this is just kind of a losing endgame for white, since black will very likely find a way to either trade off the queens or just win more pawns, because black's pawn structure is kind of more coordinated than white's is. So, for example, here, just grab this guy, and black is completely winning here. Whereas if the king was on g2, white would actually have time to bring their rook into the game and all that kind of stuff. Like if instead, back in this position, instead of playing king to h1, white tried king to g2, there would still be a very similar continuation here. Takes, do this trade, all this kind of stuff. But now, pawn to d3, it's not as deadly because, what's it called? I should probably just make sure I'm very accurate here. Like if takes, and then bishop takes, like black's still doing very well, but white can at least try to hold on with a move like queen to f2. Like bishop to e4 check is not mate anymore, or white is still very much losing, but at least it's harder for black to win here. But this is not what happened in the game. Instead, we have this position, and white did not take this pawn and try, the very desperate line with playing king to g2 now and all that kind of stuff. White instead, went for a very, basically was playing for tricks, was kind of praying maybe that black takes this pawn with their own pawn or something, and that white can continue an attack somehow, but that sadly doesn't work. Like black just takes the pawn on c2 and is getting ready to promote over here. White tried playing queen to c8, stopping promotion this way, but black was just like, no, I've got this now too. This is very not good for white. And so, yeah, in this position, white decided to resign, and I guess we got to see the power difference between a FIDE master and a grandmaster on full display in this game. So, I hope that you enjoyed. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. After this video, I'm going to be taking a look at the move 7 sidelines, so I'm looking forward to that. Bye for now.